At 2:10 a.m. local time on June 22nd, in a classified mission dubbed Operation Midnight Hammer, B-2 stealth bombers launched 12 massive ordnance penetrators alongside Tomahawk missiles, striking Iran's Fordo and Isfahan nuclear sites that President Trump declared the facilities completely and totally obliterated, calling the mission a spectacular military success. This was the first direct U.S. strike on Iranian soil targeting nuclear infrastructure since 1979. Proponents argued Iran was minutes from building a bomb. The sites were fortified, deeply buried. Diplomacy failed.
Now is the time for peace, but only after we destroy your nuclear threat.
But at what cost? The U.S. bypassed Congress, acted without international mandate, and struck sovereign territory. Iran claims no immediate loss of life, but damage is still being assessed. Tehran retaliated firing missiles at Al Udeid base in Qatar. President Trump dismissed this as very weak, yet the strike marked a dangerous regional escalation. Critics warn this opens the door to broader war, threatens global oil supply through the Strait of Hormuz, and undermines nuclear non-proliferation protocols. Is obliteration first, diplomacy later, a formula for peace or a catalyst for chaos?
This is not ancient history. This happened now. The world is watching, and tonight, we bring both sides to the table.
Iran has danced on the red lines for years. The UN talks, the IAEA inspects, and Tehran lies, again and again. What were we supposed to do? Wait until Tel Aviv disappears in a mushroom cloud? President Trump didn't just act. He prevented retargeted infrastructure, not people. Precise, deliberate, legal under Article 51 of the UN Charter, the right to self-defense. The strike was strategic, not chaotic. Fordo and Natanz are fortified bunkers. These aren't hospitals. These are military assets hidden underground. We hit them because no negotiation held teeth. We've been talking since the JCPOA. Nothing changed except the centrifuges spinning faster.
That's a convenient rewrite of events. Article 51? That's invoked after an armed attack, not before one. There was no bomb. No immediate threat? You acted not in defense, but in preemption. And let's be honest, precision doesn't erase precedent. You've shattered every diplomatic bridge. Iraq taught us that intelligence can be wrong. And you gambled again, this time with nuclear escalation. Iran will retaliate, the region will bleed. You've struck sovereign soil without Security Council backing. You've sent a message, treaties are optional, aggression is negotiable, and might makes right. Is that the world order you want?
Sometimes, law follows reality, not the other way around. We've warned Iran for years. And what did they do? Enrich uranium, develop missile programs, and fund proxies from Yemen to Lebanon. This wasn't just a military strike, it was a message. If you play with fire near our allies, near our interests, you get burned.
And in sending that message, you've lit the fuse. The world doesn't need more messages written in blood. It needs leaders who can hold fire and negotiate peace, not those who drop bombs and call it restraint.
And so, the clash begins not just of missiles, but of meaning. Who defines justice? Who writes peace? And what happens when both sides call the other side's warning a lie?
Iran has danced on the red lines for years. The UN talks, the IAEA inspects, and Tehran lies, again and again. What were we supposed to do? Wait until Tel Aviv disappears in a mushroom cloud. President Trump didn't just act. He prevented. We targeted infrastructure, not people. Precise, deliberate, legal under Article 51 of the UN Charter, the right to self-defense. The strike was strategic, not chaotic. Fordo and Natanz are fortified bunkers. These aren't hospitals. These are military assets hidden underground. We hit them because no negotiation held teeth. We've been talking since the JCPOA. Nothing changed except the centrifuges spinning faster.
That's a convenient rewrite of events. Article 51? That's invoked after an armed attack, not before one. There was no bomb. No immediate threat? You acted not in defense, but in preemption. And let's be honest, precision doesn't erase precedent. You've shattered every diplomatic bridge. Iraq taught us that intelligence can be wrong. And you gambled again, this time with nuclear escalation. Iran will retaliate, the region will bleed. You've struck sovereign soil without Security Council backing. You've sent a message, treaties are optional, aggression is negotiable, And might makes right. Is that the world order you want?
Sometimes, law follows reality, not the other way around. We've warned Iran for years, and what did they do? Enrich uranium, develop missile programs, and fund proxies from Yemen to Lebanon. This wasn't just a military strike, it was a message. If you play with fire near our allies, near our interests, you get burned.
And in sending that message, you've lit the fuse. The world doesn't need more messages written in blood. It needs leaders who can hold fire and negotiate peace, not those who drop bombs and call it restraint.
And so, the clash begins not just of missiles, but of meaning. Who defines justice? Who writes peace? And what happens when both sides call the other side's warning a lie?
Let's drop the polished language for a moment. You didn't bomb Iran to stop a war. You bombed Iran to show dominance. This was political theater staged at 30,000 feet with 2,000 pound bombs. You say it was to protect the world, but where was that same urgency when civilians in Gaza or Ukraine were under fire, or when dictators crushed protests? You act when it suits your interests, the rest? Collateral.
Power isn't about fairness, it's about order. And if America doesn't assert itself, others will, with far less precision, far less hesitation. Iran funds Hezbollah, fuels war in Syria, and supplies drones to Russia. You talk of more high ground while Tehran plots in shadows. The question isn't why we struck, the question is, what took us so long? You think Iran wants peace? No, they want leverage. They want to negotiate from a nuclear position. Trump just kicked the before they could checkmate.
The cowboy doctrine, shoot first, justify later. You assume the world is safer under a single fist. But might isn't morality. And chaos born from fear will only give rise to worse enemies. Today, it's a nuclear bunker. Tomorrow, a university. That looked suspicious. You're setting a precedent for every authoritarian to strike first and apologize later, just like Putin did with Ukraine. Are you fighting chaos or becoming it?
We became chaos long ago. The only difference now is we're finally admitting it.
As facts fade, narratives remain. And when war becomes performance, who's the actor, who's the victim, and who just rewrote the script of global order?
Let's address the hypocrisy head-on. 5 countries legally own nuclear weapons. The US has over 5,000 warheads. Israel has never signed the NPT but is allowed to exist in silent possession. But Iran? Iran even enriches uranium for power. And suddenly the world must panic. Who decided who can and can't have deterrence? Because it wasn't a fair vote, it was a colonial inheritance dressed up as international law.
You think this is about fairness, it's about trust. The US may have nukes, but it doesn't chant death to Iran every Friday. It doesn't smuggle weapons to militias in Yemen. It doesn't erase countries from maps. Iran has lied, consistently, about enrichment levels, about inspections, about intentions. Nuclear power under a regime like that isn't a right, it's a risk. And no, the US doesn't owe Iran the benefit of the doubt when its own supreme leader says, the West must fall.
And how many lies did the US tell in Iraq, in Vietnam, in Latin America? You speak of risk as if the West hasn't been the single most destabilizing force on this planet. Iran may be flawed, yes, but no more so than any nation that's tasted empire. You deny them the bomb not because of morality, but because you want to keep your seat at the top of the food chain. It's not about peace, it's about control.
Then control is peace. And maybe we've just been too polite about it until now.
In a world with no moral high ground left, does anyone still deserve the bomb? Or is the bomb the only voice that ever gets heard?
Every action has a ripple, but inaction, that's a tidal wave. Iran's silence isn't peace, it's planning. We hit a nerve, and now proxies in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, they're all waiting for a green light. But if you think deterrence is dangerous, imagine a Middle East where Hezbollah gets nuclear cover, or where Israel feels it must strike first every time it sees a missile truck in Damascus. We didn't escalate this. We tried to stop it from getting out of control. It's Iran's play now.
You always frame chaos as inevitability, as if your own bombs weren't part of the explosion. Gaza is still burning. Syria is a fractured graveyard, Yemen a forgotten hell. You arm some of these players and now call them enemies when they turn hostile. Iran's proxies exist because diplomacy failed. And diplomacy failed because the West chose sanctions and airstrikes over actual listening. Now the region burns, and you still think fire solves fire.
We're not solving fire with fire. We're reminding the arsonist we still hold the hose. Iran pushes. We push back harder. That's how deterrence works. The minute we hesitate, Tel Aviv, Riyadh, even Amman, they all become targets. Do you want to gamble their futures on another empty round of UN resolutions?
Then tell me, who keeps giving Israel the matchbox? If this region is a powder keg, then the fuse runs through Washington, Tehran, and Tel Aviv. And right now, no one's blowing it out. They're all too busy posing for cameras while lighting the next war.
As missiles cross borders and alliances tighten like nooses, the question shifts, is the Middle East cursed by history, or by those who refuse to stop rewriting it with blood?
Let's stop pretending this wasn't about uranium. This was about Tel Aviv, about reminding Tehran that if you touch Israel's shadow, America responds with thunder. Iran didn't strike first. But Israel has bombed Syrian airports, assassinated nuclear scientists, and now lobbies Washington to act as its personal bodyguard. Are we defending global stability, or just enforcing Israeli dominance in the region under the guise of Western interests?
You call it favoritism. We call it alliances. Israel is a democracy in a sea of dictatorships. It doesn't chant death to the West. It doesn't arm militias that kill us soldiers. And yes, we'll stand by those who stand by us. Iran threatened to wipe Israel off the map. You think we're going to wait and see if they meant it? No, deterrence doesn't wait for confirmation. It prevents it.
Preventive war? That's what every aggressor says. It's always a preemptive strike. It's always a defensive posture. But look at the pattern. Gaza, Damascus, now Iran. Israel acts first, the US covers second, and then the world buries the civilians. Third. Your defense leaves mushroom clouds where hospitals used to be.
You're right about one thing. It's a pattern. A pattern that says, if you threaten our allies, there will be a cost. And maybe, just maybe, the real reason you're uncomfortable isn't the bomb we dropped. It's the message we sent.
Is this war about weapons, or about who's allowed to feel safe in a world with none? And when loyalty outweighs law, who really holds the trigger?
The moment the bomb dropped, the world blinked. Moscow called it aggression. Beijing warned of global instability. Europe stayed silent, but nervous. You've just cracked the door open, not just to war, but to realignment. Iran is not alone. Russia wants chaos in the West. China wants a distracted America. And now, they all have a rallying cry. Your missile may have hit Iran, but the echo landed in Shanghai, in the Kremlin, in Brussels.
And let them react. If Russia, China, or the EU want to take sides, let them show their cards. Because while they posture, we act. While they host summits, we eliminate threats. That's the difference. Let the alliances redraw. We've seen these maps change before, but every time, the free world still stands at the center.
That arrogance? That's what creates enemies. You think the world revolves around Washington, but the world is tilting and fast. BRICS is growing. Dollar dominance is fading, and every surgical strike like this one, it accelerates the global shift away from American leadership. Soon, your bombs won't silence the world. They'll just galvanize your rivals.
Then let them come, because we're not interested in global popularity. We're interested in stability on our terms. If that means a second Cold War, then maybe that's the cost of keeping the wolves out of the gates.
In the theater of nations, every bomb dropped is a vote cast. But when the superpowers awaken, who decides the rules, and who rewrites the endgame?
Before the first siren wailed in Tehran, your headlines were ready. CNN said strategic strike, Fox said terror thwarted, Twitter lit up with flags and HTS. Truth? Truth was nowhere in sight. You call it defense. Iran calls it martyrdom. Europe calls it dangerous. And the people? They just scroll, flooded by algorithmic lies wrapped in patriotic fonts. This isn't just war. It's theater, produced in Washington, edited in Tel Aviv, streamed on every platform on Earth.
No, this isn't theater. It's clarity. In a world of deepfakes, bots, and AI-generated outrage, action speaks louder than opinion. Iran funds propaganda in Arabic, Persian, English, even French. It trains trolls faster than it trains soldiers. So, when we strike, we cut through the noise. We send a message even the loudest disinfo campaign can't drown out. The West may spin narratives, but Iran writes fables.
Then explain this. Why does every civilian death disappear in your version? Why does every intercepted missile become precision? Why do your defensive operations always take place on foreign soil, while your media frames it as homeland protection? You've militarized storytelling itself. And now, your enemies are just learning to do the same.
Because perception is the modern front line, and we'll fight there. 2. With memes, with headlines, with facts and fire. If Iran wants to play the victim on camera, let them just know, in this war, it's not the best storyteller who wins, it's the one who still holds the remote to reality.
Two visions: one sees empire masked as defense, the other sees danger hiding behind diplomacy. But in the smoke between them lies the truth we fear most. What if this war isn't about right or wrong, but about who writes the ending?